Hey, Stefan Hartman here. Important message we have about pediatric obesity. So let's go through the facts. Epidemiology, 43 million kids. This is back in 2010, so this has probably only increased since then. Under age 5, this is 2010 again, 24% of kids were fat. This is in the US. This is from Medscape. The pathophysiology, so the obese child has increased risk of diabetes type 2. They have increased risk of renal disease, including dialysis, which is basically going to a center to have your blood cleaned because your kidneys do not function well enough to do them on their own. Increased risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Yes, children can get this too, and it's a growing problem. Why is it a growing problem? Well, the number one reason for liver transplantation by the year 2030 will be non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's no longer alcoholic liver cirrhosis. There's no longer hepatitis C or B. It's fat on the liver. Entirely preventable, by the way. Obesity increases cytokine release. So this is from Shaker in 2014. Other cytokine release from allergens, viruses, increased duration of severity. So you may have heard the term cytokine release before. This has been popularized in the pandemic. We understand that COVID doesn't necessarily cause death and disease. It's the body's own response to it. So patients with higher fat mass, they will have higher cytokine release and cytokine storm, which precipitates death in COVID illness. The skinny fat child will have poor muscle tone and increased visceral fat. So that's fat on the organs, fat on the belly. This leads to insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is very common. About only 8% of the population is metabolically healthy. You can measure how healthy someone is metabolically by measuring their fasting insulin, which I do routinely for patients, both pediatrics and adults. Typically you want a very low fasting insulin, below 5 when you get a fasting blood draw. Typically I see this very elevated, and people live with high insulin constantly. This is insulin resistance. Higher visceral fat will lead to high insulin resistance, high inflammation, and increased disease. Now, what's the problem with having an obese child? Well, you have increased risk of developing adult or elderly diseases more early on in life. So typically we think of someone who should only get a heart attack, or they shouldn't get a heart attack in the first place, but if they are going to have it, it should be age 80, maybe 90, they die of a heart attack or stroke. When you have an obese child, these diseases of elderlies is now seen in younger people. So if you are an obese child, you become an adult, you can expect these diseases age 35, age 40, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, high blood pressure, much earlier in life. So that's the huge problem with pediatric obesity. It's not okay for a child to be fat. It's setting them up for earlier death and a shortened lifespan and more severe disease outcomes. So that's why it's such an important topic, and it's why children need to be proactive about resistance training, getting them in sports, getting them on a nutrient-rich diet. I look at what children are eating in the cafeteria at schools, and it's disgusting what is being fed to the children. It's all processed food, high carbohydrates, low nutrient density. It's pizzas, it's macaroni and cheese, very low protein, very low vitamins in this. Children are eating only junk, and they are obese. I see it every day. Go to Walmart, see kids are walking home from school. They're soft, they have low muscle tone, they have high fat mass. All these children are insulin resistant. I don't need a test to tell me this. You just look at a person, you can tell they're insulin resistant. This leads to hormone disruptions, metabolic disease, as we said, hypertension, diabetes, fatty liver disease, okay? Leads to increased risk of cancer. So all-cause mortality increases when you have higher fat mass, high fat on the organs, visceral fat. So kind of a heavy topic, we'll leave it at that, and thank you for joining me.